September 11th, 2011. It was the first time I remember actually sitting down and fully watching a NFL football game. I was a young child at the time, and to me, football wasn't as interesting as something like Ben 10 or Batman. And yet, my attention was completely captivated by this man who looked larger than life. I saw him throwing what looked like at the time 50-yard deep balls on a dime to wide open receivers. I saw him rush out of the pocket, something I had never seen before in an NFL game in my very short amount of living. I saw a larger than life being on the football field, and I was hooked from that minute. The first football game I remember truly ever watching in full was Cam Newton's debut game in 2011. He went on to throw for over 400 yards, and he rushed for 18, having 2 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown in his very first game ever. And the dude looked like a superhero doing so. He brought a level of energy to the game that I had never seen before, and he made me a Panthers fan from that day forward. As I was just a kid growing up in North Carolina, I really latched on to this team, and I latched on to Cam as a player. He was larger than life, he was explosive, and he was amazing to watch. Cam lit the league on fire in just his rookie season, throwing for 60% completion rate, 4,051 yards, with an average of 7 yards per play, 21 touchdowns to 17 interceptions, but he also rushed for 706 yards on 126 carries for an average rush of 5.6 yards per carry, with 14 touchdowns on the ground. He was the definition of a dual threat quarterback. He was larger than life. Cam wasn't going to run around you like Mike Vick. He was going to run through you. The dude was practically a linebacker, built at 6'5", 250 to 260 pounds, depending on the point in season. And while that might have been Cam's best year passing, was his rookie year, just from a yards standpoint, he still maintained consistency with a high 3,000 yards to the lower-ish 3,000 yards. He rarely ever passed for under 3,000 in his first stint with Carolina. And as a matter of fact, in his 2015 MVP season, he passed for 3,837 yards and was able to put up a touchdown to INT ratio of 35-10. Cam wasn't exactly a turnover machine like many people like to portray him as. And to go along with that, he had 10 touchdowns on the ground for 636 yards on 132 carries with only 4 fumbles. To me, Cam was this larger-than-life player. He was electric. He was amazing. And I felt like his stats backed it up. The dude seemed like a true franchise quarterback that could lead us to the promised land. And so imagine my shock when I got online and saw the discourse surrounding him. Cam Newton, outside of Charlotte media and even some places in Charlotte media, was widely frowned upon simply because Cam was, well, himself. Cam very much was brash, and he was damn near arrogant with the way in which he played football.
Next series. Ain't no more of that. All that's gone, man. Offense depend on the defense, defense depend on the offense. We're in this thing together. Man. We're gonna scratch, claw, bite, spit, anything to win this game. We ain't losing this game, man. Yeah, so me, lock in and execute. That's it. Lock in and execute. That's it. You ain't got to do nothing special to be special, man. Trust ourselves. Trust the person that's next to you. Trust the plan. And let's rock and roll, man. Let's go. Dominate on 3, dominate on me, 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
Listen to the way in which he encourages and hypes up his teammates. It's very much an A-type personality. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. And when Cam is hot and he's on, the whole team is hot and they're on and they are raring to go. But when Cam is down and Cam is sad, the whole team feels that. And I think that partly is why he got a lot of scrutiny. But that's also because the dude just carried the swagger of a black man. And that is undeniable. The dude dressed flamboyantly, much like our boy Russell Westbrook, but he often received a lot of flack for doing so because it was different, because he was using self-expression. Cam overall was just being himself. He was very much in your face and he was physical. When he scored a touchdown, Cam was the type of dude who was going to dance and celebrate and basically have a good time playing the sport of football. And yet the NFL media seemed to hate him for it. Even Charlotte media seemed to dislike the way in which he would be so flamboyant. Sure, he wasn't your typical quarterback, but he was not a bad person necessarily. He had his allegations coming out of college revolving around a stolen laptop, something that didn't really end up conclusively. But for the rest of his time in the league, dude didn't have a bad reputation, nor was he out here doing heinous things. Ben Roethlisberger. Yet the dude was vilified.
So this weekend, Kelvin Benjamin used to play with Cam Newton, came out and crushed Cam Newton, basically saying, I would have loved to have played with any other quarterback, somebody who was accurate and put the ball where you could catch it. Anybody with knowledge of the game. And of course, Cam defenders came out in droves, they always do. But you know what, Carolina? It's too late with Cam. You can bring in the new coach. You've coddled and babied him for the last 7 years. Now you bring in Norv Turner and you want him to change? It's too late. This is why I really believe Cam Newton is Russell Westbrook.
They question Cam's toughness despite the fact that he was one of the few quarterbacks who genuinely took a lot of helmet-to-helmet contact hits even when he was in the pocket. And a lot of the times the referees would never call these hits against Cam because he was a bigger guy. And when Cam would say anything about it, he would be called a crybaby and terrible. Yet if Tom Brady was taking these helmet-to-helmet hits, there would be a penalty. Each and every one of these hits is from one singular game that Cam Newton played the first week of the 2016 season in a rematch with the Denver Broncos. All of them head-to-head, and 0 of them were called as penalties. Cam never left the game, he played the entire game through to the end, and yet his toughness was constantly called into question. So was his ability as a signal caller, and as well, he was always being called into question about his flamboyant touchdown celebrations. In 2015, especially when the Panthers were 9-0, Cam Newton was catching a lot of flack for dancing in the end zone after scoring a touchdown. These are legitimate criticisms that were levied against him because the dude liked to dab and dance in the end zone. Why was he any different than, say, any of the rest of the league who were also dancing in end zones? There were other black players in the league dancing in the end zones. There were other white players in the league dancing in the end zones. But Cam Newton was a popular black quarterback in a position in which the quarterback is supposed to be this stoic and almost impenetrable type of character. He's not supposed to show emotion. He's not supposed to dance when he scores a touchdown. Cam broke that mold, and the media hated him for that specifically. And it only got worse as Cam would go on to give the Panthers the best record they have ever had in franchise history, leading my team to being 15-1 in 2015. He took my team, which is wildly young. We were founded in 1995. He took my team to their second ever Super Bowl appearance and was looking extremely strong in doing so. And unfortunately, he fell short in Super Bowl 50. Cam didn't exactly look like himself that day when he was out there playing. And a lot of people put the loss almost squarely on Cam for one simple play. Cam didn't dive on the football during a fumble in Super Bowl 50. The team was already down and behind, and had he jumped on the ball, maybe there would have been a different outcome. And Cam even admits to this going forward earlier in 2024, saying that he wished he would have jumped on the ball, and that if given the chance he would have done so again. But I don't think that single play defines the entire game. Denver's defense had our receivers blanketed for a majority of it and tore our offensive line a complete new one. And yet nobody talks about that. They only speak about Cam. Cam was known for wearing his emotions on his sleeve. He was known for his larger-than-life personality. So when he got to that final Super Bowl press conference, it honestly didn't surprise me that he walked out. He was frustrated with himself, he was upset, and also he was just being asked dumb questions. Like legitimately stupid questions that reporters should not have been asking. Does it mean that Cam should have gotten up and walked away? Not necessarily. But it doesn't mean that he should be labeled as a crybaby and his entire legacy should be founded on these two moments of his career. And yet they were. Cam was labeled a crybaby, and that's the way it went for the rest of his NFL career. He was a crybaby who couldn't stay healthy and couldn't lead a team to winning a Super Bowl. Now, I've spent the last 8 minutes building up as to why I like Cam as a player, why I feel like his treatment was unfair, but I haven't exactly provided you guys an example of how other white quarterbacks of about his similar standing were treated. I've mentioned Tom Brady and I've mentioned Ben Roethlisberger, but honestly, Cam, when it comes to his quality and caliber of quarterback, honestly is rivaled by somebody who happens to share his division, in which he was a similar style of player to when it comes to overall career longevity, stats, things of that nature. And I would argue that is the Atlanta Falcons' Matt Ryan. They played in the same division. They both were about of equal standing as quarterbacks, but they couldn't be more opposite than one another. Matt Ryan is everything you would have wanted your prototypical quarterback to be. Matt Ryan is the perfect pocket passer. He is extremely level. He doesn't have highs and lows like Cam did. He's very much in the middle, and he's exactly what you want out of your prototypical white quarterback. Great pocket passer, very level emotionally. He doesn't really celebrate when he scores touchdowns, at least not in the way Cam does. He very much is everything you would have wanted. And so when Matt Ryan messed up and made mistakes, he did not receive the same level of vitriol that Cam received. As a matter of fact, Matt Ryan went to the Super Bowl the year after Cam Newton did. Matt Ryan went for 2016's Super Bowl 51, and he played against the New England Patriots. They got off to an amazing lead, being up 28-3 on one of the greatest dynasties football has ever seen, if not the greatest dynasty football has ever seen. And yet, they completely blew it. And part of that blame falls onto Matt Ryan for going completely cold in the second half of that game, which is highly unusual because Matt Ryan was, in all honesty, on one of the greatest playoff runs for a quarterback I had ever personally seen. The dude had a 135.3 quarterback rating, 71.4 completion rate percentage, as well for throwing over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns with 1 rushing touchdown, all in the playoffs. And every single one of those stats works completely annihilated by the end of the game because the dude just could not physically complete a proper pass near the end point of the game. At halftime, he was at an 85% completion rate at 13.7 yards per attempt with a 158 passer rating. By the end of the game, he fell to only 73% completion rate, 12 passing yards per play, as well as only having a 144.1 quarterback rating. Now, as good as that sounds, when you watch his performance in game, he physically didn't do enough as a quarterback to finish it out. He didn't complete the right amount of passes to finish it out. Now, part of this is, of course, on his coaching staff for not running the ball properly, but Matt Ryan definitely didn't finish that game perfectly, and yet he receives very little flack for that performance. Sure, the team itself gets laughed at, but I never hear Matt Ryan is the reason you guys lost, and Matt Ryan is terrible. And also, Matt Ryan never got to that same level of success post that Super Bowl game, and yet again, he did not receive the same amount of criticism that Cam did when Cam didn't reach that exact same height following his quarterback performance in Super Bowl 50. Both quarterbacks did a lot for their teams in very different ways when it came to getting them where they ended up being at the end in the postseason and getting to the Super Bowl. Matt Ryan displayed intense and amazing pocket presence and was just throwing dots. Cam was more mobile and used his legs and big-bodiedness getting outside of the pocket to make plays. Oddly enough, when I look up Cam's stats from that 2015 playoff run, they don't list his rushing stats, to which I believe is another way they're disservicing him as a quarterback, because rushing is very much a part of his game, just like it's a part of a lot of quarterbacks' games in the modern era that we see today. Something that I had originally left out of this video, but I feel is very poignant, is that Cam did at one point in his career truly try to be like Matt Ryan in the sense of presenting the perfect quarterback image in interviews. Cam essentially decided to, instead of being himself, try to portray what he thought the media would want out of a quarterback, what he had seen out of other quarterbacks. He tried his best to emulate that, and we see that in his interview in 2006 with Rivals. Let me play a clip for you real quick and tell me if it sounds different to the Cam Newton you've been hearing and seeing throughout the rest of this video.
First question, this rivalry game coming up against Banneker, what does this game mean? How is it kind of different from the other ones you play all year?
Westlake versus Banneker, it's an exciting game being in it and watching it. When you're in the game, of course you want to win because you're playing against your friends, your enemies, and your family. So like Coach Allen said, you're playing against people in your neighborhood, people that go to your church, and your homeboys. It's an important game, so you want to have the bragging rights.
Cam tried his best to come off as though what he believed they wanted to see out of him as a quarterback, and it backfired terribly. As a matter of fact, people tore into Cam on his way out of high school and towards college because they believed he wasn't being authentic and that he wasn't being himself, which is partly true. This wasn't who Cam was, but it's who he thought he had to be. The idea that he had to put his blackness on a shelf and portray whiteness in a sense to be a respectable NFL quarterback prospect, to be a respectable college football prospect. And I think that's part of the reason why when Cam made it to the league and he really made it out of college, he wasn't trying to put on a face or a show for anybody. He was going to be himself, because if he's going to get torn apart for trying his best to go against his own self and portray what he believed the media wanted to see out of him, then he might as well just get torn apart for being him. And I think that's really important to how we see Cam as he is now in the current state, especially when he was playing, and how we saw him in interviews and the way in which he spoke to his teammates versus how he was trying to present himself at one point. I can't believe I almost cut this from the video because it truly is poignant to what I'm trying to get across. Anyways, back to your more regularly scheduled part of the video. And yet, even today in 2024 and 2023, Cam really can't escape the negative connotation the media has surrounding him when it comes to being a quarterback. Even on his own time, Cam often likes to evaluate players through his own podcast that he runs to this day.
Boy, this is a wacky one. Former, and that's a key word here, former NFL quarterback Cam Newton. He's only 34 years old, right? He's been out of the league for 2 years. Just remember that. Cam Newton has a podcast now. And you know the new model is every former player gets a podcast. It used to be that the former players went into TV, as you see a bunch of guys here on this network. They go into radio. Now, everybody gets a podcast. It's like Oprah, she used to give away cars. Now every former player gets a podcast. Tom Brady, you got a podcast. Chad Johnson, you got one. And now Cam Newton. But now he's 34 years old and out of the league. He's watching a lot of older guys play quarterback, and I think he's a little bit salty. So what Cam Newton did this week was he went after some quarterbacks. He went after Jared Goff, Tua Tagovailoa, and then MVP favorites Brock Purdy and, wait for it, Dak Prescott. First of all, I don't know why he's dressed like a conductor from Thomas the Train. Anybody with kids out there knows who I'm talking about. Cam, that's an interesting outfit. That being said, boy, game manager sure sounds very coded, does it not? I think Tom Brady was a game manager for the first, 10 years of his career till he got Randy Moss.
Notice how he goes out of his way to insult the way Cam dresses. He's not just sticking to the points that Cam made about these players. And when Cam called them game managers, he was not saying that as an insult. He was simply saying that that is their style of play. He was saying that Tua is a game manager. He was saying that Brock Purdy is a game manager. Now, Brock Purdy looked a lot better last year than he is currently, but it is proof that when Brock Purdy doesn't have all of the weapons surrounding him, he is more of a game manager than a game changer. And he said this about Dak Prescott, which, if you watch football, everybody knows Dak is low-key below a game manager, in all honesty. As much as I want to root for the guy, he doesn't play very good football. At least not right now in his career. But these comments were made in 2023, and so using the context there, it is fair to say that we didn't have enough on Brock Purdy to call him a game manager. But it was absolutely uncalled for the announcer to attack Cam not only with what he's currently doing, but insinuate that he is salty and bitter about the fact that he's not playing anymore, and also just trash on his style in general. He tried giving him some backhanded compliments and saying, Cam was great, but in all reality, this just felt like another way for the media, and specifically this man, to insult Cam Newton on live television and call him an idiot, when in all reality, a lot of what he said has ended up proving to be true. And honestly, even in trying to give praise to Cam Newton in the beginning of his little argument so that it sounded better when he insulted him, he wasn't exactly being very good about complimenting him. Cam Newton was only the second black quarterback to ever win a league MVP. He was only the second, and yet nobody ever seems to really want to talk about that. As a matter of fact, us as black people were often not seen as being intelligent enough to read a defense and being intelligent enough to play the position of quarterback. We as a race didn't really start to play QB until the 1950s, and that started in Canada, not even America. To this day, we have only seen very few successful black quarterbacks that weren't also lambasted because, and I quote, they run too much, or they don't know how to process or read a defense, that they're not smart enough to do so. And if you think that's old rhetoric and that doesn't really have any real standing or notion in today's NFL, I would just like to point to the 2021 draft. For just about every single year leading up to the 2021 draft, there was a quarterback named Justin Fields and a quarterback named Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was always seen as a generational #1 overall pick talent, and that really didn't change from the day he was taken. Except Justin Fields was considered the consensus number 2 overall pick in that draft. He was considered to be this great mobile quarterback prospect that was supposed to be like Trevor Lawrence's other half, essentially, when it came to drafting for the 2021 draft. And yet, oddly enough, there seemed to be one singular article that came out that stunted Justin Fields' ability to be taken at a higher round. Dan Orlovsky went on to the Pat McAfee show and said that not only was Justin Fields not intelligent enough to read a defense, and that he quote-unquote lacked the IQ and mental capacity to be a quarterback. Yeah, that was said in 2021. They also said that Justin Fields lacked work ethic and that he was a last guy in, first guy out type of player, which I, as somebody who vehemently follows OSU football, knows is an absolute lie. That is not the type of player Justin Fields was, nor is it the type of player he continues to be to this day. He seemingly still works extraordinarily hard, even if his processing isn't up to par. Now, while his comment about processing at the NFL level might have held weight, for them to say this before he was even drafted, to say that he isn't smart enough, that he only has the physical tools, is oftentimes a levy that we see held against black quarterbacks. And it's something we are still seeing to this day in big 2024. They just found new ways to say it. We're super athletic and hyper good, but we're not intelligent enough to play the position. It's one thing to offer criticism in that way, but it's another thing when all of these criticisms are oftentimes being levied against black quarterbacks specifically in a stereotypical manner. And it's honestly sickening. Justin Fields' stock dropped from number 2 all the way down to the bottom of the top 10 at number 10. That's how far Justin Fields fell in the draft. Even my Carolina Panthers passed up on him, a decision that I still think is wrong to this day, but that's besides the point. All while somebody else's draft stock rose, that being Zach Wilson. And his draft stock essentially rose off of a fairly decent combine performance and a throw that went absolutely viral. BYU's Zach Wilson's draft stock rose so high that the dude was selected number 2 overall to the Jets, the position in all reality that Justin Fields should have been selected to. And of course, if you had said this at the time, you would have just been accused of race baiting and that Justin Fields clearly wasn't as good. And yet, in 2024, Zach Wilson is struggling to find any sort of playtime as a quarterback, and Justin Fields just took the Steelers to a 4-2 record. Now, while he has been benched for Russell Wilson, Justin Fields was still playing quarterback and still starting at a decent clip and playing fairly well, whereas Zach Wilson played so atrociously on the Jets that absolutely nobody wants him. All of this because Dan Orlovsky went on live television and trashed on Justin Fields' intelligence. And in my opinion, that's horrific. A black quarterback's draft stock can be dropped so rapidly because all you have to simply say is, oh, you know, the dude just can't process. He's not very smart. He doesn't have the IQ to be a quarterback. And yet, I feel like we see the same story repeat itself over and over and over and over again. I mean, how many more examples of this could there possibly be?
The Philadelphia Eagles have traded the 32nd pick to the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens select Lamar Jackson.
There it is.
Quarterback, Louisville.
This has to be the only first round in NFL draft history.
A Heisman-winning quarterback that went at the end of the first round. As a matter of fact, the Ravens had to trade up in order to draft Lamar Jackson. He won the 2016 Heisman Trophy. He was a two-time ACC Player of the Year, and yet he went number 32nd overall. Why? Because they questioned his ability to throw the ball, and they questioned his IQ to play the quarterback position. But even then, through all of that, and being selected way later than Lamar ever should have, he still walked in and was confident in himself from the start. Lamar was unabashedly himself.
I'm here.
It's here. You're here.
I'm a Raven. It's on. All year. Every year. Yes, sir.
What could you have done differently that you could have gotten out of that room quicker and got drafted earlier in your career?
Nothing. I'm happy to be a Raven. It don't even matter.
Throughout the draft process, Lamar had actually been asked to change positions multiple times. Yes, Lamar Jackson was asked to change positions. As a matter of fact, Lamar was asked to both play not only running back by one other NFL team, but he was also asked questions repeatedly by the media as though he was supposedly supposed to just switch to a slot receiver after being drafted for whatever reason. Oh, that's right, because his processing speed isn't there. He's not smart enough to play it. They told him he should go as a slot receiver. He should go as a running back. This dude was a bona fide quarterback. All he had ever played was quarterback. Throughout his entire life, all Lamar had played is quarterback. He was extraordinarily electric. As a matter of fact, the dude just won a Heisman as a quarterback, and yet all teams ever saw out of him was his running ability. They didn't see anything else. And so that's what they typecast him as, and they tried to pigeonhole him as nothing more than a runner. And honestly, for the first year that he stepped in backing up Joe Flacco, that's genuinely a lot of what Lamar did. He did run the ball a lot. Jim Harbaugh had designed an offense around Lamar's athleticism, and so the connotation of Lamar is nothing but a runner was constantly being thrown in his face, especially throughout his first year in the league and the way he was playing as a rookie. He was nothing more than a runner. And yet, despite all of that, in his second year in the NFL, Lamar Jackson would go on to win a unanimous MVP. He was the second player ever to win a unanimous MVP, with Tom Brady being the first. In 2019, Lamar won the unanimous MVP because not only was he running the ball, he was also dotting up your favorite team like there was no tomorrow. He had a passer rating of 113.3. He threw for 3,127 yards, 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and the dude rushed for 1,206 yards on the ground with an additional 7 touchdowns using his legs. Lamar Jackson had put up over 4,000 yards combined between rushing and passing, and yet the narrative as nothing more than a running quarterback or a running back, as the media so often joked that he was, still prevailed, which to me seems ridiculous. Sure, he wasn't your perfect pocket passing quarterback, but a running back doesn't just casually throw for 3,000 yards. A running back doesn't casually throw 36 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions. Lamar played out of his mind that year, and yet he did not get the respect that he deserved in the slightest.
Anonymous quotes.
The worst.
From the defensive coach that said that Patrick Mahomes plays street ball and that He doesn't care if Lamar Jackson won 12 MVPs. He still wouldn't be a one as a quarterback, which, by the way.
And mind you, that's in 15 games. He didn't even play a full 16 games, and he won the unanimous MVP. That's how electric Lamar Jackson was as a quarterback. These articles genuinely say it all. And now, Lamar himself, as well as an athlete, simply wasn't perfect. The following 2 years, he didn't exactly have his greatest passing numbers, throwing for sub 3,000 and throwing more picks in 2021, almost more picks than touchdowns, at a ratio of 16 to 13. Wasn't necessarily great, but he wasn't just a runner. I mean, we just personally watched him win his second MVP award this past year, and the pace Lamar's on right now, in 8 games, he's on pace to throw for 4,000 yards, as well as rush for nearly 2,000, all while having a touchdown to INT ratio that is 17 to 2 currently. For reference, he threw 17 touchdowns in 2022. And yet, the stats, the numbers, when you watch the guy play, none of that was convincing the media at all. As a matter of fact, you can still find a 2-hour video on why Lamar Jackson is nothing more than just a running back. A 2-hour video just based upon that solely, that will be linked in the description for your viewing displeasure. And even the Cardinals in 2023, who are known for mostly joking about their upcoming schedule, and decided to post an image that essentially just related Lamar to a running back. That negative connotation has stuck with him to this day, despite the fact that it's just not true. As a matter of fact, Lamar looks the best in the pocket that he has ever looked in his entire career this year. And yet he still ends up with these shitty accusations. Even fellow quarterbacks in the league noticed this, Patrick Mahomes being one of the few people who has. He even went out to speak on behalf of Lamar in 2022 about the weird way the media was treating him as a quarterback, and just black quarterbacks in general.
That was also met with backlash, so star quarterback Patrick Mahomes was asked recently about all of the comments. Y'all take a listen.
I mean, obviously, the black quarterback has had a battle to be in this position that we are, to have this many guys in the league playing. And I think every day we're proving that we should have been playing the whole time. We've got guys that think just as well as they can use their athleticism. And so it always is weird when you see guys like me, Lamar, Kyler kind of get that on them and other guys don't. But at the same time, we're going to go out there and prove ourselves every day to show that we can be some of the best quarterbacks in the league.
I loved Patrick Mahomes' comments. I loved them because Patrick Mahomes understands he's walking an incredibly tight road. So many people are waiting for him to try to use race as a crutch, and instead, what Patrick Mahomes said is we are going to go out there each and every day and prove ourselves.
But listen to the words that this man, a black man, chose to use. He said on national television that Mahomes did a great job of walking the line. He didn't use race as a crutch, as though pointing out the true injustices and indifferences that black quarterbacks face in the NFL is quote-unquote using their race card as a crutch. To me, that's absolutely disgusting for him to say, because what Patrick Mahomes said is true. And if I personally wish Patrick Mahomes would have gone deeper, but I understand why he didn't. And as a matter of fact, I do want to shift to speaking on Patrick Mahomes himself for a little bit. I have levied a lot of criticism at the NFL for bashing on quarterbacks like Cam Newton, like Lamar Jackson, Colin Kaepernick, for bashing on these types of quarterbacks. And yet, they seem to glaze Mahomes to absolutely no end. Now, part of that is because Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league, hands down. Even if his stats aren't exactly showing it this season necessarily, he's got a literal undefeated record, and Patrick is simply just one of the best players we've ever seen play the quarterback position ever. But it's extremely easy to make Patrick Mahomes the face of the league for a few reasons. And I'm gonna have full disclosure here. I don't want to pick on a light-skinned brother, because I am one myself, but I also see and know through life experience it affords him a few extra benefits over his darker-skinned brothers. For example, it is a lot easier for the NFL to prop up Patrick Mahomes as the face of the league when he is a light-skinned quarterback who could almost pass for a different race. It's really easy for them to prop him up when he is married to a white woman known for being a MAGA Trump supporter.
What's my favorite cheat day meal?
Fried chicken.
No.
Chicken fried steak.
No.
And mashed potatoes.
Mexican food.
Online. That makes it very easy for a socially conservative league to prop him up. As well, this is one of the few, if not only, times I had heard Patrick Mahomes ever speak on black issues or black rights, something that other quarterbacks seem to do fairly often, other black quarterbacks specifically. Think Colin Kaepernick, for example. Again, part of it is because Patrick Mahomes might be one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, but another part is he is a light skin. He did marry a white woman. Not that I'm saying that's bad in any sense of the word. It's just, from the NFL standpoint, it makes it a lot easier to put him as the face of the league, especially in comparison to someone like Lamar Jackson. Doesn't exactly have a wife, who is often flamboyantly black. Listen to the way Lamar talks, like I've played clips earlier. Lamar Jackson loves to wear chains when he plays. Lamar plays with grills in his mouth. And while obviously stereotypically black, it is still something that Lamar connects to his blackness with. Mahomes is far more level and far more of what you would expect from your stereotypical quarterback. So again, it just is simply easier to prop him up as the face. And that's no shade to Patrick Mahomes as a light-skinned man. That's unfortunately just the reality of what it is. Colorism is truly real. Hell, we even see it in the casting of Green Lantern Jon Stewart, who is often known to be a black man. That's actually part of his character. He was drawn that way specifically. It's part of his character, and yet that piece of him is somewhat stripped away, and that's of no shade to the actor who plays him, who I guarantee you fought for that job. But that's simply the truth. And if you don't believe me, if you don't believe that Lamar's blackness or any black quarterback's blackness can be used against them and basically used as a way to shun them, then I have an amazing example of when blackness is essentially commodified and whitewashed, how it becomes extraordinarily acceptable in the league, and how it becomes this amazing marketing tool for the league. No other than Kirk Cousins.
How awesome is it to feel like that when you're at an away environment?
Oh, I love it. When I was in college, I said there's no better feeling as a college player playing for Michigan State and hearing the chant, "Go green, go white," across the stadium. My teammate used to say, "Walk into your trap, take over your trap," was the line he would say. And so that's kind of what it is. You go into someone else's stadium and you try to assert yourself.
Walk into your trap, take over your trap. Now imagine if a black quarterback had went into an interview and said this. Think about the absolute media shitstorm we would probably see if Lamar said this, if Justin Fields decided to say it. Hell, even if Patrick Mahomes decided to say it, I guarantee you he'd catch backlash for it. But that's not exactly where it ends. As a matter of fact, Kirk Cousins was literally put into an NFL commercial in his Kirko Chains appearance, in which he is shirtless, wearing a bunch of chains and looking iced out. A stereotypical image of blackness. Now, personally, I don't really have a huge problem with Kirko Chains doing what he's doing, if that makes sense. Honestly, sometimes I think it's fairly funny. But I also see just how twisted it is from the perspective of a white man doing it versus if any sort of person of color in the league tried doing something similar. It's not cool and novel and funny when our blackness is shown by us, but when it is commodified and taken by the white man, it is hilarious all of a sudden. It is socially acceptable. Kirko Chains is something you look forward to seeing at the end of each one of his wins. As a matter of fact, I want to play you a pregame speech from a few weeks ago in the NFL, depending on when you see this video, that is from Kirko Chains, and I want you to imagine if Cam Newton, for example, had said this speech in a pregame warm-up.
We fight no cap! We fight no cap! We walk in your trap, take over your trap! We walk in your trap, take over your trap! Run the trap! We run the trap! We fight no cap! We fight no cap! We walk in your trap, take over your trap! We walk in your trap, take over your trap! We walk in your trap, take over your trap!
As somebody who played football, I don't necessarily mind the sentiment behind what he's saying. What Kirko is saying is very standard when it comes to hyping up your team, getting them ready to go play football, right? My big problem truly comes in with the fact that had this been any other race of quarterback, there would be questions by the media. There would be lambasting of the player that said this, but because Kirk Cousins says it, the Falcons are putting it on their social media page and praising him for saying it because it is a white man saying this shit. And that is what bothers me. Not that Kirk O'Chains is doing it necessarily, but the way in which the media responds to it. Originally, I was going to call the video here and be done with the topic. I felt like by this point in the video, I had beaten the horse to death when it came to me saying that black quarterbacks were treated unfairly by the media. I felt like I had effectively gotten my point across. That was until last Sunday. As I'm recording this, it is November 2nd. And last Sunday, somebody decided it would be a great idea to make a political statement on live television for all of the NFL to see. And he just so happens to play for the 49ers. Seems kind of familiar. Nick Bosa went on live television and, might I add, he crashed his teammate who was being interviewed. He crashed his own teammate's interview to show his endorsement for Donald Trump, which, you know what, players can endorse whoever the fuck they want, even if I vehemently disagree with his endorsement and I think he's an idiot. He can do that, right? That's his right. But you also have to be open to the fact that you have to take questions about what you just did, especially when it's finally your turn and you have the live mic and it's your press conference. But Nick Bosa doesn't do that at all.
I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I think it's an important time.
No, instead Nick Bosa tucks his tail between his legs and decides that he is simply not going to address it at his own press conference, but no, let him crash his teammates' press conference instead, because that is far, far better. Now, I really wanted to bring this up because this is the same Nick Bosa that trashed Colin Kaepernick in 2016, tweeting that he was nothing more than a clown because he took a knee during the national anthem to protest police brutality. Colin Kaepernick was quite literally blackballed from the league because he decided to take a knee during the national anthem. Colin Kaepernick was treated horribly for this decision. A decision, mind you, that in the very end press conference of the game, he responded to immediately. Before he could even get the press conference, he responded in the locker room to reporters and spoke out about something he truly believed in. Nick Bosa hid.
What are you trying to accomplish? What would you like this to be the end game for you?
That's basically. I mean, ultimately, it's to bring awareness and make people, realize what's really going on in this country. There are a lot of things that are going on that are unjust, people aren't being held accountable for, and that's something that needs to change. That's something that, this country stands for freedom, liberty, justice for all, and it's not happening for all right now.
Personally, I was going to leave Kaepernick's entire situation alone, mainly because the dude went to court with the NFL, he took their settlement, and he got his money, and the situation was kind of over after that. I felt like Colin Kaepernick's situation had personally been beaten to death, not only by YouTubers, but by the broader stage of the media, and that a lot of people were truly coming around to the idea that, this is just a situation that happened, and that it was honestly wrong and honestly terrible. Yet, I see Nick Bosa going on live television, pulling this stunt, not explaining himself afterwards, crashing his own teammates' press conference. He crashed his own teammates' press conference. Keep that in mind. And then refused to elaborate. And then, after all of that, you know what's funny? I don't see the typical shut up and dribble guys coming out to say anything. And I waited a couple of days too. I didn't want to just put this in the script immediately because I wanted to wait and see if the same level of backlash that hit Colin Kaepernick was going to hit Nick Bosa for what he just did. I don't see the shut up and dribble guys coming out. I don't see the it's football, there's no place for politics. I don't see any of that bullshit coming out the way it did when Kaepernick decided to speak his mind. And to me, that is honestly and personally ridiculous. We see a whole man who had his NFL career taken from him in years where he definitely could have still played and been a serviceable quarterback at the time, especially as a backup. And yet, he was blackballed out of the league, and Nick Bosa is going to walk away from this with a fine and just about nothing else, because I guarantee you by the time the election season is over, people will forget about this and move on, because he's just a white dude. And that's just what happens. You know, I bring all of this up and I say all of this, and I want to hopefully get this video out in the middle of the NFL season to hopefully just spread awareness to people about the treatment of black quarterbacks. We may not be getting called the N-word or not being able to play the quarterback position completely and being barred from it, but we're also still not being treated as proper equals, specifically by the media. They don't care to see us as anything more than commodities. We are only able to speak our minds if we're singers or rappers, and we're not even able to speak our minds if we're athletes. Alright? We can't even do that. I also felt that it was poignant that I brought up different examples from different eras. I started with Cam Newton because that is the era I started watching football. And this is a pattern that even I as a young kid could recognize, and I watched happen as I grew up and watched football because it never really ended. Instead of being overtly racist, they were simply implicitly racist. They found new ways to demean us as people and as athletes by saying we're not intelligent enough. We're so hyper athletic, always focusing on our athleticism, almost fetishizing our athleticism, but always tearing down at our intelligence. Not something they typically do with white quarterbacks. And while I might not agree with every statement Cam Newton makes, or Justin Fields makes, Kaepernick makes, or anybody else that I've brought up in this video like Lamar Jackson, it doesn't mean that their treatment by the media has been done properly nor correctly. They have all faced extraordinary scrutiny and honestly unfair scrutiny and have not been given the same grace and courtesy that their white counterparts have been given. Need I remind you that Ben Roethlisberger was accused of raping women, and yet Cam Newton still ended up with a worse rap than he did? Yeah, because that is the world we live in. We are expected to be extraordinarily excellent. We can't have any sort of mistakes, nothing like that. Because the minute we slip up, the second we slip up, it's going to be broadcast to the world as a way to defame and deshame us, even when our white counterparts may make that same mistake a million different times and receive far less punishment. And I'll be completely honest with each and every one of you. There is one way to try and leave an impact when it comes to this, and it's simple. Stop watching NFL football games. Stop watching the games, stop engaging with the articles, the media, stop playing fantasy football. And I'll also be 100% honest with you guys. I run a fantasy football league. I have watched every single Panthers game this year. I own 2 Panthers jerseys, right? I almost wanted to buy tickets to go see a game if it wasn't for the fact that my team is like 2-8 right now and we're absolutely terrible. I am personally part of the problem. Because the only way that this really changes is if you affect these corporations at their bottom line. Because that's all they really care about at the end of the day. And because the NFL is still such a socially conservative league, they're going to cater to their common denominator. That happens to be MAGA white guys. And unfortunately, that sucks for the rest of us NFL fans. But I present this all to you to hopefully gain some sort of awareness so that when you read that next article about Shedeur Sanders and how he is far too cocky and doesn't have the intelligence to play at the next level, you might think twice about why that article was written and why it has been portrayed in such a way. I have personally left a link to just about every single source that I used in this video. That way you can go back and do some research for yourself, especially if you disagree with a lot of the things I've said here. You can go find where I've gotten each and every one of these statistics, and you can debate me in the comments if you want. But honestly, that's all I have to say about this topic, because I'm tired, and these videos are emotionally draining to make. Now it's time to do the whole YouTuber thing. You know, if you like the video, please leave a like. Helps out the channel a lot. If you want to sub, that's amazing. This is a relatively new channel for me, so any subscriber base that we can build as a community would be great. I'll be covering similar topics revolving around race, specifically black people, going forward with this channel. That's pretty much what I want to make it about. I do have a Patreon down in the description. It'll probably be linked at the bottom or top, wherever I decide. You can join for $1 a month, and you can see these videos early and unedited, because I have a feeling the NFL is going to make getting this video out hellish. So Thank you all for watching, even those of you who hate watching. And I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.